You are vegetarian?
Yes.
And since when?
Basically for the last 40 years.
And what's the reason you became vegetarian?
Well, I think because the idea that, well, to quote George Bernard Shaw, animals are my friends and I don't eat my friends.
Mm-hmm. And that's basically it.
Well, you know, I mean, just as I wouldn't particularly like someone to kill and eat me, I don't think any being wants to be slaughtered and killed and eaten.
Mm-hmm.
And especially considering the manner in which animals are killed in this day and age, the terror and trauma that they go through in the process. How can we sit down and eat them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course in Tibetan Buddhism we are taught that all beings have been our mothers. And really, if you really believe what you're saying, then how can you sit down and eat your mother?
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's controversial within Tibetan Buddhism, eating meat?
Oh, it's extraordinarily hypocritical, that's for sure. In Tibet, they had an excuse insofar as it was a very high climate and there really wasn't much growing, and especially for the nomads, it would be very difficult to cultivate. So there, the only thing which was available to be eaten was the barley flour, the tsampa, and the meat and products from the milk, from the tree, the female yak. But, I mean, Tibetans have been living now in exile in India and Nepal for 50 years, and both those countries are primarily vegetarian. They have plenty of vegetables, they have plenty of protein in their lentils and their dals and their milk products, and there's simply no excuse anymore.
No. Mm-hmm.
And in fact, the lamas themselves and the ordinary people know that by eating so much red meat, they are getting diabetes, high blood pressure, heart problems, stomach cancer, and a lot of arthritis.
Yeah.
So they know now. They say, oh, this is because I eat the wrong kind of diet, but I can't give it up.
It also seems that for health reasons only Tibetan Buddhist lamas need to eat meat. And sometimes they eat meat and they say, yes, it's because my doctor advised it, or it's for my health. But it's not in other traditions, is it? Without being personal to one lama or another, but...
Well, the thing is that if the Tibetans have it very strongly in their mind that if they go without meat for one meal, that they feel weak, and next meal have to make it up by double the quantity.
Mm-hmm. So it's culture.
It's culture, but it's naughty also, because they say, oh, well, you know, we were brought up eating meat. Now, first of all, this doesn't necessarily have to be true, because most of the Tibetans in India and Nepal were brought up in India, not in Tibet. But also, we as Westerners were also brought up eating meat. I mean, you know, in an English breakfast, you get bacon and sausages for breakfast. The main meal is centered around the meat, and also in the evening again it's all meat. If you take away the meat, all you've got is potatoes and squishy vegetables. I mean, there's nothing. You know, the whole point of the meal is the meat. So it's not that we were brought up as vegetarians either, but as soon as we realized that what we are eating is actually was a living being who wanted its life and didn't want to be killed, and was probably reared in the most ghastly of conditions before dying a very painful and traumatic death. How can one subscribe to that? and in that way approve of that torture for millions of animals by eating them.
Buddha didn't forbid eating meat.
Well, the point was that the Buddha at the time, he and his monks were all on alms round. They were supposed to go without any discrimination. You couldn't say to the lay people, look, I don't eat this and I'm not eating that. You ate whatever was given you without discrimination. For example, in the sutras there's a description of a leper offering a meal to one of the monks, and one of his fingers fell into the bowl, and the monk ate it because he was non-discriminating. And so the rule was made that if you didn't kill the animal yourself, you didn't request it to be killed for you, and you are not aware that it was killed on your behalf, then karmically you are pure, because you were just wandering around through the villages collecting whatever people happen to want to put in your begging bowl. But in a situation where actually you are in charge of what you can eat, and you go into butcher shops and you buy meat, then in a way the very fact that you're buying it is saying that you are subscribing to the whole culture which rears meat to be killed for consumption. I mean, they only raise and kill these animals because people buy the meat. If we didn't buy it, that particular industry would die out. Nowadays, it has been noticeable that in India, the first Tibetans to become vegetarians were usually the nuns, the nunneries. And then recently some of the very large monasteries in the south of India have become vegetarian, at least within the monastery. I'm not saying what the monks eat when they go out. But as a result, I mean, this must mean if you've got a monastery with, say, 8,000 monks, how many animals would be killed, especially for like New Year celebrations and special occasions, who now are no longer slaughtered for the sake of the monastery. I mean, it's an enormous difference. And there are also youth organization who is against meat eating, who have these sort of horror documentaries of what actually happens, especially in the West, to animals and how they're actually reared in the dreadful conditions they're reared in, and then how they're actually slaughtered and their fear and terror. And so this is being taken around when there are big gatherings of Tibetans for any special functions. They show these DVDs, and that does have an effect on the people, because often people just haven't thought about it. Mm-hmm. And when they think about it, then they can say, oh, you know. And of course certain High Lamas themselves are vegetarian. His Holiness the Gyawan Drukpa, head of my tradition, and His Holiness the Gyawa Kamapa, head of the Kamakaji tradition, they are both vegetarian. And they encourage people that even if they cannot become completely vegetarian, at least they should eat less meat, and they should only try to eat at certain meals in the day or certain days of the week, etc. At least they should be able to cut down. Some of the most carnivorous lamas I ever knew nonetheless radiated an aura of tremendous purity. And I'm a vegetarian. You know, I'm not defending meat eating. But while I think it would be wonderful for all the beings on earth if people would stop eating them, I don't think it has anything to do with getting enlightened.
Because?
Because many of the greatest enlightened beings ate meat. The point with vegetarianism is that in this modern day and age where food is so easily obtained, there doesn't seem to me to be too much excuse to eat any kind of food which has caused pain to another being. I mean, it doesn't seem to fit in with our whole idea on compassion and bodhicitta. Does it?